And welcome to UCF Night Shift, or maybe it's like a better term, Saturday Night Live. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Andrew Gluchov as we are here. UCF now just finished off the Temple Owls 38-13, the final score. Andrew, give me your thoughts here. Kind of a weird game. Temple was without a lot of players, including Russo, their starting quarterback. I think they were out two quarterbacks. They were down to like 50 players. This is not an easy game to judge because clearly Temple was undermanned, and UCF kind of was up and down for the night, but did what they had to do. What stood out to you?
Oh, well, I mean, this was all about the defense. Temple came in with a very barren cupboard. We expected Anthony Russo to show up, and that was the original plan. It was a late scratch. He didn't make the trip down to Orlando because of COVID protocols. And, they lost their top running back due to opting out earlier this month. I mean, they were on to the third string quarterback. It was just one thing after another. And the Temple offense struggled early and often as a result of it. I mean, timing and synergy takes practice. It takes repetition. And Temple didn't have it. And the defense just feasted on them. I mean, Eric Gilliard with that strip early on that basically he literally pulled it out of the quarterback's hands and set up, a score. And the thing about UCF's offense is they didn't have to do all that much early on to build, a 3-touchdown lead. They just took advantage of what the defense gave them.
Yeah, it's one of those things. UCF jumped out to the quick lead, 21-0. I feel like they coasted, right? This was a hard game to get motivated for. I mentioned this on the podcast. I'm sure that the UCF players and coaches watched Cincinnati on Friday night destroy East Carolina. Human nature, right, Andrew? You can't help yourself, but there's a piece of you that's thinking about Cincinnati. You just can't get up for a game like Temple. You see the record, Temple's downgrade is undermanned. You watch them on tape, they don't stand out. You're not going to get the best performance out of their team here yet. The defense, I thought, was solid. They did what they had to do, and they have, continued some encouraging signs on the defensive side of the ball, really since the second half, you would say, of the Tulane game, going into the Houston game, and here tonight.
See, and then I discount the fourth quarter of this game because it was the second stringers. There was a lot of, I don't want to say garbage yardage, but there was a lot of extra yardage and a score on top of that, not against first string, players. The offense had a bad game. I mean, that's the only way you can describe it is they were out of sync. The timing wasn't there. The synergy wasn't there. There were multiple players that had, struggles. Dylan Gabriel struggled. Cole Schneider had a really rough game over at left guard. Jacob Harris couldn't catch anything in the first half to save his life. Marlon Williams had a couple of uncharacteristic drops, including one in the end zone that would have been an easy touchdown that he normally makes. A lot of mistakes happened early on. They're lucky it was against a bad team, but against a Cincinnati, they would feast. And if a UCF fan needs to be really concerned going into the Cincinnati game, could have been a chance of looking ahead. Absolutely. There was a 4-touchdown spread on this. I mean, we're not talking about a close game. Cincinnati is going to be 3:30 next week on a major network, one of ESPN or ABC, and they'll decide it because they 6-date it. But that's a major game that network people are highlighting as one to watch. And it's going to be in Orlando. The focal point is going to be on that UCF offense on whether they can keep up with a Cincinnati defense that has embarrassed pretty much everyone they've played, including Memphis and SMU, which have really high-powered offenses themselves.
Yeah, no question about that. Let's talk about who stood out to you individually, both on the offensive end and on the defensive end tonight, if you had to give game balls.
Well, game ball, let's start with the defensive side because they had the better game. And I'm looking at Eric Gilliard. Eric Gilliard had an outstanding game. He led the whole game in tackles. He had 12 total tackles, 3 of them for loss, and that big forced fumble that set the tone for the rest of the game. That's what leadership is about, is making big plays, setting the pace, and giving other players inspiration to rise up and create that momentum. As we know, football is a momentum-based sport, and it took until the fourth drive of Temple to even break 10 yards of total offense. That's how awesome the defense started this game. And obviously that's not sustainable, but to be able to build a big lead really quick because the defense was that on point, really set the pace for the rest of the game. As you said, they coasted. And they didn't have to try all that hard. And in fact, the fourth quarter, they didn't try at all. I mean, they pretty much run, punt. That's pretty much how the fourth quarter went. And they didn't have to do anything else. As far as the offense, this one's a little bit tougher. I have to go with Otis Anderson on this one. There was a couple big plays. Jalen Robinson had this amazing 70-yard. They classified it as a pass, but I mean, it was basically a run because he did everything himself. But as far as the whole bill of work, I got to go with Otis Anderson on this. It was 10 carries, 83 yards. He had a touchdown. It was a hard-fought game. The running game went through spurts, much like the rest of the offense. The offensive line just really didn't have great rhythm, and the UCF offense started to almost exclusively run to the right side of the offensive line because of it. And with the passing game so off-kilter, and it took until the second half before Dillon Gabriel got back to 50% completions on the day. By far, his worst outing of the year as far as output goes. Anderson really was kind of that guy who changed the pace and was able to continually do something. I mean, he had a 22-yard long run, over 8 yards a carry average. If it wasn't for the fact that he split time with Greg McCrae, which I mean, you have to play Greg McCrae, he easily would have had 100 yards.
Yeah, no doubt. What do you as you look at the offense? Brian tweeted out during the game. Brian Murphy was at the stadium right now. That's why he's not with us, because it's 11:30 at night as we record this. So it's gonna be a long night for him. No, but he mentioned that Temple played a little bit of a defense similar to what Tulsa showed UCF, a little bit 3-3-5, a little bit there. Did you see that, what Temple showed, and gave UCF some fits? And I bring that up because you look at next week with Cincinnati. Cincinnati has the athletes to play a similar scheme. They did that last year at home. Any concern about that, again, that scheme that you saw Tulsa is giving UCF fits with, and Cincinnati, Temple showed a little bit of that, and UCF struggled in that second quarter?
Well, I mean, you go with what works, and Tulsa's proved it more than once. Pitt's done it. Cincinnati's done it. You go with a defense. If you have a defensive line that can crash and cause a lot of disruption and take advantage of guys having bad days, like in this case, Cole Schneider had a rough day over at left guard, you can cause a lot of disruption. Having the 5 defensive backs forces UCF, a pass-first team, to switch gears and become a run-first team, which they did in the second quarter. And that's how they were able to generate really any offense, was they became a run-first team. In the second half, they reverted back to a pass-first team because they had the chance to hit the reset button, and it worked at least through the third quarter before they took their foot off the gas. But the thing is, Temple really didn't have the horses to pull it off successfully, and that's why UCF was able to adapt and be able to continue to pull away from a team that just really wasn't all that great. But as you say, the second quarter, Temple outscored UCF 3-0 in the second. Everything that could go wrong pretty much did. And, one thing we've seen about Dillon Gabriel, as outstanding as a quarterback he is, when you crash the line and you force him to rush, he struggles. Every loss that he's had, it's been the same thing outside of the Memphis game where it was just, a shootout, and one team just had one more round than the other. I really got nothing more on how Cincinnati's going to bring this to the table. We know what they're going to do because we know what Dillon Gabriel's not good at, and they're going to do it. Luke Fickell is a defensive-minded coach. He's really good at what he does, and he's got an incredibly talented team. I mean, the fact that they held Memphis and SMU well under their averages, if I'm correct off the top of my head, both under 20 points. And, look what Memphis did to UCF. They put up 50. If UCF wants to, even have a chance at this game, they need to find a way to either get Gabriel a little extra coverage, a little extra protection, or they have to really focus on the running game, because that running game will help set up the pass. You've got, two outstanding running backs with Anderson and McCray. And you can throw Bentavious Thompson in there as well as the third guy. But, I mean, you have two outstanding guys who are in the process of rewriting record books at UCF with Anderson and McCray. You've got to utilize those weapons. On a normal basis, they take second stage compared to a guy like Dylan Gabriel, who himself is rewriting record books. But you got to take what the defense gives you, and we know Cincinnati's going to bring it hard.
No doubt about it. You could, by the way, send us questions. We already got a comment here on our YouTube page, and of course, you could also ask us questions on Twitter. Of course, I'm at Eric Lopez Elo. Andrew, where are you on Twitter? For those that don't know,
catch me at Statboy Drew.
Statboy Drew. That's a nice little Twitter handle, easy to remember. Send us questions there as well. I know we got one question over there, and of course on our Black and Gold Banneret Twitter account as well. Let me bring up this one. Michael Rakowski commented saying Heupel didn't do Quadri Jones any favors with his play calling. So obviously Quadri Jones comes in, blockbuster news tonight. He threw an incompletion for the first time in his career. The world, I mean, what is going on? Somewhere Jeff is very upset. Jeff Sharon, who has been pumping that stat since Quadri Jones has been here. So that's gone. No Mackenzie Milton, not a surprise. Josh Heupel even commented on Thursday that he was not ready to go. So nobody should have been surprised about that. But your thoughts on Quadri and the backups coming in? I don't, it's hard to read. I think they just wanted to get out of there. Don't you think? I mean, with the play calling, they were very vanilla. The last thing you want to do is get anybody hurt in a fourth quarter of a blowout. And I kind of, held my breath there when Cam Good was shaken up. And I'm like, oh, boy, holding up his wrist. Thankfully, he came back. But to me, I'm not a guy that's like, hey, let's leave our starters and put up all these points. I'm the type, especially in a game like this, just run the clock and get out of here because you got a big game coming up in 7 days. I don't need to be messing around in the fourth quarter and getting people hurt.
Oh, absolutely. I think they handled the fourth quarter just fine outside of one little blip, which is why in the world was Greg McCray back on the field at the end of the game? That makes no sense, and that was a terrible decision. That's the one that I'm upset about. I'm not upset about Quadri Jones not throwing the ball at all. I'm upset that Greg McCray was on the field at all. They should have benched him at that point. The game was already decided. There was no benefit of having him back on the field other than the fact that there was a risk of something potentially going wrong. Thankfully, nothing did. But, I immediately knows, like, what the heck is going on? Who made that decision? And I hope someone's going to question it during a press conference because that's definitely a head scratcher. If UCF could, they would have packed it up and ended the game at the end of the third. There was no point in playing the fourth quarter. And having guys like Kadri out there, it's nice for them to get some game time, but anything else is just window dressing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't actually lead to anything. The game was already in hand. They're not your starters. You're not expecting them to see any game time, and you hope that in the case of a player like Kadri Jones or a Demarius Good, that they don't see any meaningful playing time in a close game because that means someone got hurt. So yeah, you want to give them a little bit of game experience, but you don't want to get away from being safe and I hate to use the word prevent because then people say, well, it's prevent defense. It means prevent stopping the ball. No, you also want to prevent your guys from getting hurt. And you're right. When Cam Good went down, you had to wonder, but he was back out pretty quickly. It looked worse than it was. I'm not sure what it was, but just, you take it, you try to run away as quickly as you can, get ready for the next one because as I'm going to call it in my knee-jerk reactions, this is the calm before the storm.
Ooh, the calm before the storm. I like that. Wait, you're playing off the little storm we just had here nearby us here a few days back here, aren't you?
Yeah, a little bit of a rainstorm. I mean, it doesn't beat the one time I had a flash flood where the sewer lines got so backed up I had schools of fish swimming in the street. Not that bad, but it was definitely, we got a little bit of rain here in the Sunshine State this past week.
Yeah. Let me read you actually some tweets here. Chris Vanini of The Athletic, who we've had on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, tweeted out, UCF only put up 419 yards against Temple and is no longer on pace to break the NCAA's per game yardage record. Knight's now averaging just 618 yards per game. Oh,
I know, right?
oh.
UCF, averaged what, about 656, I think it was, going into this game.
Yeah,
and,
you can. Yeah,
419. Leaving that, almost 2.5 right there. That's not far off of what Temple had for the whole game. Temple only had 290 yards of total offense, and that includes the fourth quarter against the second stringers. So it was a bad day for the offense. It was a good day for the defense. And, while it'd be cool to break that record, I care more about a W than I do about that record.
I think they would agree with you on that. Brian, by the way, at Spokes_Murphy's tweeting out some of the post-game comments. Josh Heupel has said on the post-game, quote, I thought we were relentless with our effort all night long on the defensive front. I thought our linebackers did a great job of tackling in space all night long. Your thoughts on Heupel's comments there about the defense?
Oh, he's spot on. I mean, the linebackers had a great game. We highlight, that's my highlight right there. You're talking about 24 tackles right there, just between, three players, Bethune, Jean-Baptiste, and Eric Gilliard, my player of the game. I thought Jean-Baptiste had an outstanding game. He was basically the third linebacker of the day. Tatum Bethune started alongside Eric Gilliard, and then Jean-Baptiste came in later. And all his tackles pretty much were solo. So, I mean, he was doing a lot of stuff in space and was making stops. The technique was sound. It was great. I mean, the only real bad miss that I saw really all game in general was when Aaron Robinson missed the fumble and that ridiculous Corey Thornton interception where he got so starstruck he was ready to run before the ball came in and required a tip drill to get it for no extra yards. That went from a 30-yard turnaround to 0 real quick.
Yeah. More comments from Josh Heupel, courtesy of Brian Murphy here. Heupel said credited the UCF's offense slow second quarter to a lack of execution, missing open plays, penalties, and negative plays that set them back. That was Josh Heupel's comments of what went wrong in the second quarter. Pretty dead on, right? Do you agree with that assessment there? What went wrong in the second quarter there? What's your thoughts? What Josh said there?
That's kind of a high level way of saying it. But I mean, there was timing problems. There was execution problems, which is such a coach speak right there. But there was a lack of synergy. Guys weren't on the same page. I mean, look what happened even in later on where, 2 snaps that, Gabriel wasn't really ready for. One ended up being a big loss, and one was a lucky heave of a play, 30 yards to Jacob Harris, which was a risky throw and a very lucky catch in itself. That's timing and synergy. There was no rhythm, and this is where they have to go back to the chalkboard and say, okay, what went wrong, and okay, what can we do to fix it? Because there is a big game coming up. You can't avoid it. It's coming. And it's going to slap you in the face if you don't find a way to rise up and solve these problems. Normally, UCF's offense is spot on. They have little mistakes here and there, but they're normally really on point. And today was not it. But you know what? Every team's going to have a rough day. And this was UCF's offense's rough day. The defense had their rough day against Memphis. So each one's got it out of the way. As they say in Family Guy with Spider-Man, everybody gets one.
Everybody gets one. There's a good movie reference. See, Murph would like that. He's all about the movie references. All right, we got a question on Twitter from Tan the Man. Thanks for tweeting out. He goes, "Why do we continue to try and kick field goals?" Exclamation point.
All right. Yes.
Andrew, people still uneasy about the field goal kicking game, I guess.
Well, and I don't blame them, but let's analyze for a second what actually happened with that first kick. I mean, the kick itself was truly horrendous. I mean, it wasn't even remotely close. It may have even been blocked a little bit. Trajectory was just so far off. But situationally, you're in the second quarter. The team has sputtered as far as offense. They're not moving the ball. It's 4th and 15 at the 28-yard line. You're not getting a first down. The offense is giving you no confidence that they're going to get a first down. So what do? You don't punt from the 28. You kick field goal. And the thing is, Daniel Obarski has a cannon for a leg. He really does. His kickoff numbers are phenomenal. We've seen it. Most of his kicks end up being touchbacks. Place kicking is a mental problem. It's a mental aspect. And we know that his mentality has come into question a bit, especially when you saw that little fracas that happened at the end of the Memphis game between him and Kadri Jones. One thing to help build confidence is you still have to push him out sometimes. That 45-yarder, it was the right call. It just looked really ugly. The second kick, I think, was just a settle of, get out there, get the first one out of the way, the first one out of your head, and make another kick. I think that's what the second field goal was more about, because you're close enough there. You could have made an end zone attempt and really put the game away. But on the flip side, it was also, you're up by a lot. Do you really want to rub it in? And Heupel's not a run up the score kind of guy. So the field goal is definitely the safer bet. It's, you pushed us all the way to the goal line. We didn't get him, but we can't walk away with nothing. We're going to send out a field goal guy and get some points.
Got a lot of comments out there. Appreciate people tuning in, by the way, this late hour here, which is good after a night football. It was, got Cosseg Advisor tuning in, Eric Edwards tuning in. So I want to make sure they've both been talking over on the chat room there. Make sure you can still ask questions there. And I'm not, some of the comments was interesting. They've been going back and forth over the usage of Quadri. Some of the, argument about, I wanted to see him throw the ball. And then some, no, run the clock well. Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see him throw the ball too. I mean, we all do, because he was a touchdown machine. But I mean, in the reality of it, it doesn't matter. Take the win, take the W, take it, love it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Let's. Any other thoughts here on Temple before we move on here that I know you're going to write about on the knee-jerk reaction here on the for blackandgoldbanneret.com. That'll probably come up in the morning. But your thought, any final thoughts here from your Temple game before we move on to Cincinnati here?
I would say just put this one behind. From the offensive standpoint, everyone's going to have a bad game sometimes, and then this was a bad game. It was Dylan Gabriel's worst statistic game of the year as far as completions, and he had 268 yards. He still had 2 touchdowns. He had no turnovers himself, but he just had a timing and synergy problem with receivers, and receivers had a case of the dropsies. All I can think back is Little Giants and think of rolls of toilet paper. Do whatever you have to do to be able to catch that ball. Just move on. Watch the film, take it for what it is, move on, because we all know the offense is way more talented than the output they put out.
And probably saving some things, I would hope, for Cincinnati, too. You don't want to show everything you've got either.
Oh, absolutely. I figured today was going to be a very scaled down day, but you still have to have a base level of execution of what you're putting out, product you're putting out on the field, and they were failing to do that. If anything, I was a little more surprised that Heupel really didn't do much to try to change things. And I don't mean that he didn't adjust, because he did. He ended up moving from a pass first to a run first offense in the second quarter, which is the only reason why they even got down the field to even kick that Obarski field goal. But I'm thinking more of the fact of they really didn't do any package changes. They didn't do any personnel changes. They pretty much kept the same thing that they were doing time and time again. And I think that was intentional because let's be honest. Yeah. UCF fans love the war in I-4, but that's not the big game. The big game's next week. And you want to pull out all the stops on that one. And you don't want to tip your hand, on what you're going to prepare and present. My guess is we're going to see at least some sort of wrinkle next week in the offensive scheme.
All right. So, let's get to Cincinnati. As Bill Belichick said, on to Cincinnati.
I'm from Cleveland. Yeah, we avoid Cincinnati.
What's your thoughts, your early thoughts on this game? Obviously, this is one that everybody's going to be talking about all week long. The Cincinnati defense against UCF's offense is going to be talked about. It's going to be hyped a lot. The standings, obviously, Tulsa tonight came from 21-0 down to knock off number 18 SMU 28-24. So Tulsa and Cincinnati remain the only 2 undefeateds in the conference. SMU 2 losses, pretty much out. Remember, they lost at Cincinnati earlier in the year, so they're pretty much out with tiebreakers and purposes. UCF 2 games back it's real simple for them to have a pulse and have a shot to get to the conference title game. They got to win out, which means beating Cincinnati. Easier said than done. Your thoughts early on here as you get an early appetizing as you think about this matchup with Cincinnati here next Saturday.
I think UCF is in trouble. This is. I think that on the surface, this is going to be a rough game. Cincinnati's that good. They're the best team that's going to be in the bounce house in years. I think this team is better than either of the Memphis teams that came during the conference championship games. I think they're better than USF in 2017. This is probably the best team to come to the bounce house since South Carolina in 2013. And that was granted they weren't top 10 at the time, but that was a top 10 caliber team. This is, right now, if the rankings hold, this is a 7th ranked, Cincinnati Bearcats team that has just humiliated everyone to the point where you can almost accuse them of trying to run it up a bit against East Carolina. And I think they're not going to give any favors to UCF if they go up big, mostly because UCF has done no favors back. I remember when there was the 3-quarter game a few years ago up in Cincinnati due to weather issues. And, people remember those, people in the programs, they remember stuff like that where the game was just so out of hand. I'm genuinely concerned. While the defense has stepped up, they've stepped up against bad teams. Houston is not a great team. They're fair at best. They took it to South Florida.
Oh, especially without Marquez Stevenson. Without Marquez Stevenson, who's their star receiver, to me, they're not the same offense. I know they put up a lot of points against South Florida, but South Florida's not good. That's an example.
They're the worst in the. You can say they're the worst in the conference.
Yeah.
And then look at and this game is really no different, where your team facing a 3rd string quarterback and for a couple plays, a 4th guy. They haven't really been tested. These other players, they're in for a treat, and not in a good way. I actually thought Cincinnati was going to take a step back coming into this year. Losing Michael Warren, I did not expect Desmond Ridder to progress the way he did. I mean, he's become a multi-tool quarterback. He can throw, he can run. He's very pocket savvy. He's smart. He's really proved to be the total package. And I don't know if there's enough speed on the UCF defense, especially when they run the nickel primarily and only have 2 linebackers out there. They may have to switch down to a 4-3 to protect against Ritter's ability to tuck it and run and put more faith in your defensive backs.
Oh, you're making enemies, Andrew. You're making enemies. You're making enemies here. People aren't happy with your comments here.
I have 2 frames of mind. One is the fan frame of mind, and one is the writer frame of mind. And I have to keep them separate. The fan side of me wants, a huge win. I mean, who doesn't? UCF's my alma mater. I graduated with 2 degrees there. I love this school. However, I also have to look at it objectively. And on the surface, this looks like to be a very rough game. UCF's defense has not been convincing against strong offenses. And they're going to face against an offense that has been able to put up a lot of points. The defense on Cincinnati is something that UCF hasn't faced all year. They played against Tulsa, who held Oklahoma State in check, but Oklahoma State had no offense. So now you're looking at a team that not only has a strong defense, has a strong offense. It's a complete package. I mean, it's truth. And I want to be wrong. But, it's the truth. This is a brutally tough team against a UCF squad that to no fault of their own, has been, absolutely hit hard from opt-outs and other issues. Not their fault, but, you play with the cards that you've been given, and Cincinnati just right now has a better hand.
Got comments here. Cost Zeg Advisor, right, saying Ridder running is a problem. Boy, he has been a problem running the football. He is that run dual threat. He is a different quarterback than he was, say, even last year. I think he's better now than he was a year ago. Definitely better than 2 years ago when he was at the bounce house and it was packed and you could tell he was a little intimidated. I thought, at least you couldn't hear. Yeah.
not only that, let me throw in that UCF has had trouble with dual threat quarterbacks. And that goes back to running the nickel defense. You're basically putting the entire field on two linebackers because your defensive ends have to do the outside containment at that point. And that's not what their strength is. Their strength is to attack the outside going into the quarterbacks. But it's very easy when you're trying to get through the pocket to over pursue, and you open up the left and right lanes where a guy can just run all day. And you can't expect two linebackers to be able to cover, the whole field. It's not reasonable unless you have a guy who's a complete speed demon. And the truth is, while UCF's linebackers aren't slow, they're not fast enough to do that. And I don't know any linebacker who really is.
Sons of UCF is chiming in. They do a great job over there. Adam and Mike are good friends. They do a nice pregame, by the way, an hour before every game, alongside Trace Trelko, who's got a huge beard going on now.
He looks like a different guy.
Seriously, I don't recognize him. He did like a video thing promoting the preview the other. I thought he was like the Undertaker. I thought he was going to shave once the season started, but he's decided to keep it on. So he's just chilling with them on the pregame. We haven't been invited to them. I mean, obviously they've got some issues with you, though. Here's what Sons of UCF is saying. Since he's overrated, they have only played one road game all year. Dylan Gabriel's going to treat them like his daddy did to BYU 30 years ago. Cougars were number 4 with the Heisman quarterback, and Hawaii blew them out. He's speaking of Ty Detmer, who's one of my favorite quarterbacks, by the way.
I love that comment. I absolutely love it.
Sons of UCF, bringing it.
I know, and regardless of whether they agree or disagree, I love that comment. I mean, that's just great. Harken it to the days of old when men were men and women were women. When football was a completely different game. I think that's comment of the day for me. That actually makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I love it.
I love the historical perspective there. I mean, totally. Speaking of Dylan Gabriel's dad played over there, beat BYU. That was Ty Detmer, was a Heisman Trophy winner in 1990. I love that stat. I have a feeling I wonder if they're going to use that all week on their show. They do a podcast.
So. I mean, if you're digging into the archives like that, man, use it. I love it, and I love the work that the Suns do. They did it. Yeah. In fact, they did a great podcast on the 2000 Alabama game recently. I encourage people to check that out. They had Mike Kruzek on, Ryan Schneider, Javier Borleghi. So they're good guys. Yeah, absolutely. I got a chance to watch that, and I was sorely not disappointed because that was amazing to hear these guys give their takes on a game 20 years ago that was really a program defining moment. And while it was disappointing that they couldn't take advantage of it for a long time, it still took a big monkey and got it off UCF's back of getting so close against the SEC and just letting it somehow piddle away. And they finally got over the hump at least once, and has since done it more than once. But that first time is always the hardest. And those guys are legendary at this point. So I got to give Suns a lot of credit. They did an amazing job putting that together. That
was phenomenal. So I encourage people to check that out and their content. And like I said, they're on an hour before the game starts. And I'm sure they'll be on an hour before Cincinnati game, which will be about 2:30 on these same channels that you're watching this right now. Cost-Seg Advisors commented, spy games got to be good. So need dime and safety they can tackle. They're talking about spying Ritter. It's interesting because he was commenting during the game. I was noticing that he wanted UCF to spy the Temple quarterback just to get some reps in. Do you believe in that about spying a quarterback like Ritter? Do you believe in a spy theory?
I do. Real Mitchell is a run-first quarterback, and UCF was kind of daring him to throw the ball. And you can see, he's a young kid. You can see moments where it worked and moments where it didn't. But they did a lot of press man coverage. It was one-on-one. There was no one over the top for help, and they were relying on their defensive backs. Aaron Robinson had a lot of work, and he definitely had to work. Devon Blue was the set school records at Temple last year for receptions and yards. Good receiver. And I think that was a great test for Aaron Robinson. And I don't want to say he had a rough day, but I mean, Blue had a pretty good day overall when you look at the rest of the Temple offense. But I mean, he could have had a really good day if someone less talented Aaron Robinson was covering him. But while I'm more of a fan of having a 4-3, but that's because when I played, that's what we did was working with a 4-3 defense. So I've always been a little more based on that. But I mean, if you want to go dime and bring in a defensive back, you're going to need one that has a sound tackling skill, because Ritter's not 180 pounds. He's not a little teeny running back where you can do that with a safety. You need someone with a little bit of beef, which is why I think a linebacker as a spy would be a little bit better. But the spy concept is a good one, and I think it's one that needs to be heavily considered, because UCF does have, even though there's a lot of youth there, there's young defensive backs, they have good defensive backs. They're talented. I mean, you take out Richie Grant and Aaron Robinson, you still have talent there. So you can rely on them. You can put faith in them. The defensive line is good, but as I said before, on a nickel defense, you have to worry about that outside containment. So now with a running quarterback like Ritter, who can easily run 100+ yards in any given day, you need someone that can be able to stay with him more and focus more on him. So I would not be too surprised if at some point they even consider having a guy line up either in the middle or the out or one of the outside thirds and bring him back in as a spy. It's not uncommon. We actually saw Shaquem Griffin being used heavily in the NFL a couple weeks ago as a QB spy for that very reason, because a running quarterback like Kyler Murray could tuck it and run at any given moment. And you can't have that. UCF needs to take note of that.
I'm going to talk about this during the week on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. It'll probably drop around Thursday with Jeff and Brian. But I think there's three things to me in the Cincinnati game. Red zone offense for UCF's got to be better. Remember last year, Cincinnati won the battle in the red zone because Luke Fickell, Luke very well from covering him since Ohio State days, and his defenses. They don't want to give up. They're not going to give up chippies. They don't want to give up a 60, 70-yard play. They're going to make you go the distance of the field. They're going to make you go 10, 12 plays, and they believe they're going to make plays, and they're going to especially make plays in the red zone, and that's what they did last year. And I think that's a key matchup there. Red zone offense for UCF's got to be good, and that goes back to the kicking game too, Andrew. It's going to be interesting to see how Josh, when they get to the red zone, if they're on a fourth down situation, do they settle for field goals? Do they go for it? Some people I remember were critical of him going for it on fourth down against Memphis a couple times and leaving points on the field, but I didn't mind that approach, and he might do the same approach against Cincinnati. What do you think the approach would be as far as the red zone?
I mean, it's situational. It depends on down and distance. I mean, 4th and 1, 4th and 2. Okay, I can understand tucking the ball and going. It really depends on how well the offense has been moving the ball. How's the attack? The trenches working out for you? In the case of today, the offensive line, had some struggles, especially in the second quarter. So when it was 4th and long in no man's land, he opted for the field goal instead of trying for the first down. Whereas if the offense had a little more synergy going, he might have gone for it. I remember George O'Leary once said, when you make these kind of decisions, either you're the GOAT, as in GOAT, greatest of all time, or you're the GOAT, like bah means no. It's one way or the other. You're always going to be critiqued on a decision if it doesn't work out. And if Obarski came out and hit that field goal, I don't think we would have the same comments about it. It's the fact that he butchered it so badly. But I think part of it is trying to build at least a little bit of confidence, because he may have to tap him more this week.
Other key, I think, in the game, and this is a stat I'm going to break down a lot later in the week, yards per play. UCF's among the best in the country. Going into this game, they were averaging 7.2 yards per play. It would be on pace for the second best in program history. 2017 offense averaged 7.5 yards per play, which it's an insane number. Cincinnati's among the best in the country in that category defensively. They're only giving up an average of a 4.4 yards per play. That was prior to the East Carolina game. And then you look at UCF in the Josh Heupel era, they've only averaged less than 5 yards a play in a game twice. The Fiesta Bowl against LSU, they averaged only 4.1 yards per play. And last year's game against Cincinnati with a 4.4 average. In contrast, one of Cincinnati's worst performances in that category came in 2018 against UCF, who averaged 6.6 yards per play in that victory on that Saturday night. I think that's a key stat. I think it's an underrated stat, Andrew. I don't know why it doesn't get enough coverage, because to me, people focus on total yards and this other stuff. I think yards per play is a good telling sign about how your offense is doing and how you're defending as well, especially in today's game where some teams run 70, 80 plays. To me, that's a stat that I'm going to be following very closely next week.
Well, and look at what happened today, where you had a 50-yard play to Marlon Williams where he basically half bear crawled his way 10 yards before propping up and was able to turn a 10-yard gain into a 50-yard gain. And then you had the sweep run by Jalen Robinson that went for 70. Those skew those stats up. That's one reason why UCF has such elevated stats, is they're a big play team. But you take those out, UCF had a really pedestrian game today,
I remember the first half. To your point, they averaged only 5 yards a play. UCF tonight against Temple. That was on pace for being the lowest of the season. Their lowest was the Tulsa game where they lost. They averaged only 5.4 in that game. They were on pace. Now, they jumped up in the second half, made some big plays, like you mentioned. They ended up averaging like 6.9 per play. But to your point, they're a big play offense, and Cincinnati's defense is designed to take away big plays. Something's got to give there, and I think whoever is closer to their average, I think will win the game.
Well, it's going to come back to the offensive line. That's where this game is going to be decided. It's going to be decided between the trenches. If UCF's offensive line can gel together and give enough pocket protection for Dylan Gabriel, UCF has a very good chance of an upset here. That Cincinnati Bearcats defensive line is absolutely fantastic. They're able to crash. That's how they beat UCF the first time, is they were able to crash the line, and it caused Dylan Gabriel to have a severe case of happy feet and was unable to really set and make better decisions. We've seen where he will start running and occasionally run into the guy trying to sack him. It's happened more than once. It's really going to come down to how much time is he going to be bought to be able to make a play? Because even though UCF has two outstanding running backs, they're still a pass-first offense. And if they're forced to have to turn to the run, it's not going to bode well against a Cincinnati team that wants UCF to have to go to the run. Basically, you're playing into their hands. So UCF's offense has to be able to maintain at least enough of a passing game to be able to push Cincinnati's defense back a bit, that it can open running lanes. And that's how UCF's offenses always work, is the pass to set up the run.
Got some more comments. Sons of UCF saying the game next week will come down to turnover battle and avoiding silly penalties. Jeff Wiseman chiming in, asking a question. Does Trey Nixon play next week? That's an interesting question there, because we heard Josh Heupel acknowledge him that he was practicing. He didn't play tonight. Does Trey Nixon make his return against Cincinnati? That's an interesting dynamic there if that happens.
I think he does. I think he does. And because Temple was not a circled game, you're talking a one-win team, they didn't have to play him. But here's the question, and obviously this is going to be a Coach Heupel decision, is where do you put him? Jalen Robinson has settled in and really embraced the role that Trey Nixon had. And, do you put him back at the 2 spot, or do you move him to the 3 spot? Obviously, Ryan O'Keefe's going to be the odd man out there, and he'll get pushed back to the 4th spot. So, UCF traditionally runs a lot of between 2 and 3 wideouts, 1 tight end for blocking, and then 1 running back. And occasionally we'll mix it up a little bit from there. But so you're expecting 3 wideouts, but do you put Nixon on the slot, or do you put Robinson on the slot? Just on the surface, based on strength, I would put Nixon on the slot. He's a stronger physical wide receiver than Jalen Robinson. Robinson's a faster guy than Nixon, and because Robinson has really blossomed this year. I mean, he's close to rewriting UCF record books as far as his receiving yards in a given season, in particular number of 100-yard games. He's very close to tying the single season record of 7. He's currently at 6 now. His ability is to stretch those corners back, and that opens up a lot more. Now, here's the thing: if Nixon comes back, you hope they continue the idea that they did a couple back in Houston of look in the middle of the field, especially with a good hands guy like Trey Nixon. They, as Anthony Lenahan did earlier in the year, he highlighted how UCF did not utilize the middle of the field. And then they did a little bit, and it had very high returns. So they need to go back and use the middle of the field, especially when they're going to have a physical receiver like Trey Nixon being able to do it. And he's the guy I would do it with.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating if they try. But do you really try to, after he's been out since the Georgia Tech game, you're going to bring him out in a big game like this without any live action since? Is that a little risky, or do you think no issues there? Well,
I mean, he's been practicing. It's not like he's coming cold turkey.
Right.
He's been practicing. They do run hard during practice. It's not like they jog 20% through. He hasn't been in a game in the bounce house, but Trey Nixon isn't a freshman or a sophomore. He's not a noob. He has experience. He knows what he's going into. He knows what a big game's about. He's been in big games, and I don't think that's going to be a negative on the fact that he hasn't had game time since the injury against Georgia Tech.
Of course, this is our night shift post game. Now, we got Jessica Sheldon writing in. Glad to chat about UCF football after the game. Yes. Let us know if you like. Now, we did a taped version after the Houston game. We did a taped version. It was great. Brian Murphy was live in Houston. Unfortunately, had a mechanical issue with his wheelchair, which he is, as he broke down in the Black and Go Banneret podcast,
Literally.
He's still not 100%. He'll be back with us for the Cincinnati game. We're going to be doing this for the Cincinnati South Florida game, but I want you all to let us know, do you like it live like we're doing tonight? Or do you like it taped? We could go either way. We're going to be doing some of this, too, beyond football. We're going to be doing this during basketball season, fingers crossed, as well. Because let's be honest, a majority of us can't go to the games because of the current climate that we're in. So this is the next best thing, at least for me, because I'm tired of being at home and I need to talk to somebody about these games. And I get to talk to Andrew, so that's a good thing.
So what you're trying to say, Eric, is you're lonely, need a friend.
I need many friends right now. But
I want friends. I didn't say any today, but I want friends.
I want friends. Now, Andrew, tell the audience, because you're going to be writing up you for those, and it's done very well. The knee-jerk reactions. Tell us a little bit about what the knee-jerk reactions is about and what they can look for here in the Temple game and beyond.
Well, I mean, as you can tell by listening to me rant and rave and ramble on, I have a very analytical mind on how I look at football. As I used to play before injuries and the fact I stopped growing really came into play. But I enjoy the game and look at it not from a fan's perspective, but more of taking what the game has given us and break it down to something that's palatable that we can digest. Because my wife loves football, and I love the fact that she loves football, but she doesn't know the ins and outs and some of the nooks and crannies and the jargon that goes with it. So, if she wants me to explain something, I do, and I do it in a way that we'll all understand and still be able to appreciate. But it's also to look at things that we may not have thought about, like we talked about the field goal kicking. When you look at it from a situational standpoint and what's been going on with how the game was delivered, the kicks make a little more sense. Whereas on the surface is bad guy, can't make kick, don't send him out. It's stuff like that. I throw in some of the game stats. I throw some of the game notes in there at the end, which I know a number of people have they've commented that they like. I enjoy doing it, and we want to kick it out more to fans. If you have a question, if you want us to dig in something, we want to do it. We want to be a man among the people. We want to hear what you want, and we want to give you what you want, because in the end, while we love doing what we do, we also do it for you. We do it for the fans, we do it for our friends and our family, but it's a labor of love. It's and we love what talking UCF. This is our school, this is our home. We love the Knights and what the school has done for us. But we want to make sure that we're not sitting on a pedestal. We want to be involved with everyone else, and so we want everyone else to be involved.
And we'll certainly let you be involved out there. More comments before we wrap this up, because Andrew does going to write his recap there, and it's midnight, so we will get to sleep.
For the week next week.
Next week. We'll be on probably after the Cincinnati game, probably live. I see some comments saying they prefer live. We'll get feedback here. Brian Murphy's going to make a big say in this. This is the dirty secret. Murph calls the shots. If he wants to go live, we'll go live. That's kind of how that works, right, Andrew? That's pretty much we run around Murph's schedule.
We're his lackeys, I guess.
Other comments there.
Why do you make me have to say that?
I don't know. Running back screen, off tackle runs, wheel routes. Use Cincinnati speed aggression against them. That's one of the thoughts there that UCF should do against Cincinnati's defense. Your reaction to that?
Well, you kind of saw that with the Jalen Robinson. They classify it as a pass based on how it was run, but it really was kind of a jet sweep by execution. And look what it did. And you don't see that very often in UCF's offense. They'll usually just go to a bubble screen instead, which I'm tired of seeing bubble screens all the time. I mean, if I had a nickel for every bubble screen, I'd be a freaking millionaire. But the truth is they showed a little wrinkle. Maybe that was just a trial, man. Maybe just something to tease the palate. And it worked really, really well. But then again, Jalen Robinson's really, really fast.
Really fast. So we'll see. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up here for Night Shift. We'll be back next week. Andrew's going to go write his recap of this game on knee-jerk reactions. We're also going to do our bowl game projections. We started that last week on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Andrew, you and I will continue to do that through the rest of the year. I know some people didn't like where they put UCF. We put them, but
where else are they going to go?
Right. Yeah. So
you got to think about the fact that it's COVID and conventional wisdom is kind of out at this point. Now it's about trying to be very regionalized and trying to minimize distance because travel is not safe. So I know fans aren't happy with the idea of the Cure Bowl or the Boca Raton Bowl, and I get it, and I don't disagree. We just need to kind of realize that this is not a normal year. We'll be lucky to have bowl games at all. They've even started talking about pushing the CFP back because of all these postponed and canceled games. I mean, we had 15 games canceled this weekend alone. It's bad right now. And so you want to try to mitigate as much risk as possible. But on the flip side, and as a result, you've got 3 lower tier bowl games in Florida, and UCF, unless something magically happens, is going to end up at one of them. I mean, we just have to accept it.
Yes. But let's focus on Cincinnati because some have said this is really like your bowl game. This is a huge game. It's going to be exciting. We're going to have extensive coverage of Cincinnati week here. Obviously, Andrew's going to have his knee-jerk reaction to this Temple game, and then we're going to have our bowl projections, and then on to Cincinnati. Lots of content this week about the Cincinnati game. I'm sure we'll do the podcast later in the week with myself, Jeff, and Murph. We'll probably have somebody on from Cincinnati on. We'll have, obviously, follow me at Eric Lopez Elo. I'll let you know about the broadcasting situation, who's going to broadcast that game, and other thoughts on the week. And then we'll have our round table where the whole staff gives their thoughts to the game against Cincinnati. And then we might do some other things, too, leading up to the big game against Cincinnati, 3:30 kickoff next Saturday. It's a huge one. It's a big one. This is a fun one. I think this is a fun little rivalry developing here between UCF, Cincinnati. You could argue maybe the 2 most talented teams in the league on both sides of the ball. And this is a fun one. And I think it'll be really a big one for good exposure for the league. Lots at stake, conference title implications, perhaps New Year's 6 implications for Cincinnati, maybe even a playoff stakes for Cincinnati. This is significant. and it'll be at the Bounce House. We'll have it all covered for you on Black and Gold Banneret. Check us out at blackandgoldbanneret.com. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret. Check us out on our YouTube page. We're all over the place. We're on Facebook. All right, Andrew, where are you on Twitter once again, in case Sons of UCF can keep going after you for your very anti, Cincinnati comments there that we and our challenges?
Well, I mean, for the record, being from Cleveland, I don't like really anything about Cincinnati. So I would love for an opportunity to be able to trash Cincinnati. So I'm hoping for a good reason to do it. I just want to preface that. But you can catch me on Twitter at StatBoyDrew. I love the banter. It's all fun. It's good stuff. So bring it on.
Get him on the show, sons. Get him on. Drill him. He's ready. We can do
ready, man. I've been doing this since 2004. I'm getting old.
It's fun. We tried not to give it up too much. All right. Thanks to everybody for joining us as I experiment with this stuff. I know some of you have been tuning in since over the years, and we did some of this last year as well. So we'll try to do more of this, especially not only for football, but other sports, basketball, baseball, you name it. It's going to be a busy spring with a lot of sports, we hope. But we'll get you here through the rest of the way in football. So for Andrew, I'm Eric. You hope and enjoyed this edition of Night Shift. UCF wins over Temple 38-13. Good night on this Saturday Night Live.